He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He simply stepped into the light, and that was enough to stop a crime in its tracks. It wasn't supposed to be a big night. That's what Alvarez had said when he called Stallone 3 days earlier. No cameras, no buzz. Just you, me, and a little corner store doing something right. Stallone had smiled, not because he expected anything meaningful from it, but because he needed quiet. And sometimes, doing the smallest thing for someone else helped quiet the war in your own head. He was 78 now. The cameras still found him, but he no longer chased them. His body still responded to training, but recovery took longer. His mind, though, that was what surprised him most. Still sharp, still burning, still haunted. Not by Rambo, but by what Rambo had come to represent. That night, Echo Park was warm. Los Angeles was a city of reinventions. People who left their past behind, or pretended to. But not him. Not tonight. Because tonight, for the first time in 15 years, he put the costume back on, the bandana, the boots, the knife on the belt. Dulled, fake, but gleaming. Jenna had called it theatrics. She was a young documentarist, early 30s, idealistic and hungry. Her new project, Forgotten Soldiers, had caught Stallone's attention, not because it was revolutionary, but because it was honest. People don't want lectures, she had told him. They want to feel. Just give them that. So he agreed to help. One night, one location, no press. The Alvarez Market sat on the corner of Glendale Boulevard and Park Avenue, a squat brick building with flickering neon lights and decades of immigrant sweat baked into its walls. The windows bore faded posters in both Spanish and English, and the bell above the front door had a distinct metallic screech that sang each time it opened. Inside, the smell was a mix of stale popcorn, floor disinfectant, and cinnamon gum. Old refrigerators hummed like tired engines. Shelves leaned under the weight of dusty cans and impulse buys, but Alvarez kept it running with pride. His chest puffed whenever he spoke of his little American dream. That night, he'd cleared the center aisle, moved the chips, draped a flag across a folding table, and placed a single chair behind it. Stallone was to sit there, dressed as the icon of a generation, and quietly greet whoever stopped by. They didn't expect more than 20 people, maybe less. And indeed, only a handful showed. A man with his son who wanted an autograph. An elderly veteran who shook Stallone's hand for nearly 30 seconds, eyes wet. A teenager who whispered, "My dad loved you. He's gone now, but he'd want me to say thanks." Each visitor came and went. Jenna filmed everything discreetly, her camera tucked into her jacket, microphone clipped to her wrist like a bracelet. Alvarez beamed. Stallone sat quietly, responding with nods, a few words, sometimes just a look. Then, just after 9:20 p.m., things changed. The crowd had dispersed. Only Jenna, Alvarez, and a young boy, Eli, remained. Eli was 10, maybe 11. His mom worked night shifts. He'd been left there by a neighbor and was now crouched by the candy display, scrolling his phone. Alvarez was locking the side door when the front door slammed open with a violent clang. The bell screeched, and a figure entered, tall, slim, hood up, one hand inside his coat, the other hanging loose. His eyes were bloodshot, jaw tight, breath uneven. Stallone, standing behind a shelf near the back, didn't see him at first, but Jenna did. And so did Alvarez. The man didn't yell. He simply walked to the register, lifted his chin and whispered, "Open it." Alvarez froze. The man repeated a little louder, "I said open it, now." Jenna reached slowly for her phone. The man's eyes darted toward her. "Don't." The tension wasn't cinematic. It was fragile, real, cold. No background music, just the hum of the fridge, the rustle of Eli shifting behind the candy shelf, and the slow movement of Alvarez's trembling hand toward the till. And then, the sound of boots, heavy, measured. From the back room out of the shadow, he stepped forward. Rambo, or close enough. Bandana, knife, vest, muscles older but defined. That face, carved, unreadable. The robber turned. Their eyes met. Something cracked. In the assailant's gaze, a flicker, recognition, memory, panic. "No, no, man, no way this is real," he muttered, backing up. His breath quickened, his hand dropped from inside his coat. No gun, just shaking fingers. Then, he ran. Didn't look back, just bolted. The door screeched again, then silence. Everyone froze. Eli slowly peeked from behind the display. Jenna's camera was still rolling. Alvarez whispered, Did that just... Stallone didn't answer. He just stared at the door, heart pounding, not from adrenaline, but something deeper, recognition. But what no one in the store knew, what even Stallone himself couldn't guess, was that the young man who had just fled was not a petty criminal. His name was Marcus Dell, 27, former Marine, 2 tours, honorable discharge, PTSD, unemployed, living in his car for the past 3 weeks. And what he saw, in that precise moment, wasn't Stallone. He saw a memory, a hallucination, a ghost. Because when Marcus was 18, on his first mission in the Korengal Valley, scared, exhausted, and on the brink of breaking, someone in his unit handed him a bootleg DVD. First Blood. They watched it in silence, the entire squad. That night, their outpost was shelled. Marcus survived. 4 others didn't. He'd associated Rambo not with violence, but with survival. So when he entered that store, desperate, hungry, ready to break a law he never thought he would, and saw him, it wasn't just fear. It was memory, trauma, reverence, collapse. Therefore, his escape wasn't a choice. It was a reflex, fight, flight. And when the flight ends, what remains is everything he ran from. The video Jenna had captured went viral by morning. Title: Robber runs from Rambo. Real or staged? Comment sections flooded with laughing emojis, conspiracy theories, veteran stories, and a chorus of voices saying the same thing. That wasn't acting. That was something real. Jenna refused interviews. Stallone declined comment. But the story wouldn't die. Not this one. Because beneath the clicks and the headlines, something human stirred. And for Stallone, it wasn't over. That night, as he sat in his kitchen with a cold glass of water and the lights off, he kept replaying the look on the young man's face. That broken recognition. That haunted familiarity. He'd seen it before. Not in movies, but in hospitals, shelters, rehab centers. Places where veterans went to forget. Or be forgotten. 3 nights later, just before midnight, Stallone's phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered, "Mr. Stallone?" A woman's voice, calm, steady. "This is Officer Linda Rowe. We have someone in holding who asked for you by name. He said he saw a ghost, and he needs to speak to it. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone who'd already served his sentence long before he ever broke the law." The holding cell was quiet. Marcus Dell sat on the bench with his head bowed, elbows resting on his knees. The hoodie was gone. His hands, now visible, trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Hunger, cold, and something else, memory. Officer Linda Rowe stood outside the cell with a clipboard in hand. Her voice was calm, but curious. "You sure you want him?" Marcus looked up slowly. His eyes were pale blue, rimmed with red. He looked older than 27. A face that had seen too much, too soon. "I just need 5 minutes," he said. "With him." Linda sighed. "He's not obligated to come." "I know, but you think he will." Marcus didn't answer. Meanwhile, Stallone sat in the back of a black SUV outside the precinct, staring at the building as if it were the entrance to a movie he wasn't sure he wanted to watch. Jenna was beside him. "You don't have to do this," she said. "That's exactly why I do." She nodded slowly. Then after a pause, "What are you hoping to find in there?" Stallone didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed on the building. "Truth," he finally said. Or maybe, just a reflection. But Marcus hadn't always been like this. There was a time, not long ago, when he believed in everything America told him to. Duty, honor, brotherhood. His father was a steel worker. His mother cleaned houses. Their neighborhood was poor, but proud. Discipline was their inheritance. He enlisted the moment he turned 18, refused a party, refused goodbyes, just packed a bag and left. The military gave him purpose, and pain, and silence. After his second deployment, things got harder. He had seen what bullets did to boys, what shrapnel did to friendships, what nights in the desert did to the human mind. He returned different, but the world had not changed to receive him. No parades, no promises, just paperwork, and eventually, unemployment. He applied for jobs, waited for callbacks, lived off savings, then off credit cards, then off nothing. At some point, the nightmares became constant. Not about death, but about silence, the silence of being invisible. The VA wait list was long, the medication inconsistent. Therapy sessions were rushed, impersonal. He started sleeping in his car, then not sleeping at all. He wasn't trying to become a criminal. He was just trying not to disappear. Therefore, when he stepped into that store, he wasn't looking for money. He was looking for a sign. And when that door creaked open, and that man stepped out of the shadows, not just any man, but him, the very figure that had once given him strength in a war zone, he broke. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. Now Stallone stood before the cell. No cameras, no crowd. Just him and a man who might as well have been a younger reflection, shattered at the edges. Linda unlocked the door. 5 minutes. Stallone stepped in. Marcus stood slowly. His voice cracked on the first syllable. "I'm not crazy." "I know," Stallone said. They stared at each other. Marcus swallowed hard. "I'm not proud of what I did. You hungry?" Marcus blinked. The question hit harder than it should have. Stallone walked to the bench and sat, motioned for Marcus to do the same. They sat in silence. Finally, Stallone said, "I wore that outfit for a fundraiser. A joke, almost." Marcus shook his head. "Wasn't a joke to me." "I know," Stallone said again. "That's why I'm here." They talked. About the war. About expectations. About what it meant to come back to a country that didn't know what to do with you. Marcus admitted everything. That he hadn't eaten in 2 days. That he kept hearing voices. That sometimes, when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see himself. He saw the boy who used to believe in something. Stallone didn't judge. He listened. Because he remembered. He remembered the veterans he met during the filming of First Blood. How real their stories were. How fake he felt. How guilty. And how, somehow, the character he played had become more real to them than he ever was to himself. But Jenna hadn't stopped recording. Outside the precinct, in her hands, her phone blinked with a red light. Not for exploitation, but because she knew that this was the real story. A man dressed as a symbol confronting the truth behind the symbol. 2 soldiers, one fictional, one forgotten, meeting in a place where no one thought to look for healing. Therefore, the video would later be edited with care. No sensationalism, no clickbait, just a quiet interview. Marcus's story, his words, his pain, his hope, and Stallone's silence beside him. It was uploaded with the title, "When Fiction Meets the Forgotten: A Soldier's Real Battle." The response was overwhelming. Veterans across the country reached out. Donations flooded in for Marcus. And more importantly, so did help, not pity, but recognition, because finally, someone saw him, not as a criminal, not as a ghost, but as a man who had served and survived. In a surprising twist, Stallone contacts a former Marine he had met years ago during a charity event, now running a support program in Northern California. He arranges for Marcus to be transferred there, not as a prisoner, but as a participant. Officer Rowe, moved by the story, helps expedite the paperwork. Jenna's documentary gets attention, not for fame, but for its honesty. She declines offers from major networks. She stays close to the story. On his first night at the Veteran Center, Marcus is given a room, clean clothes, a hot meal, and a notebook. He opens it. Inside, a note written in thick, slanted handwriting. Write it all down. The truth, the fear, the dreams. You survived the war. Now, survive the silence. S. Marcus stares at the page, pen in hand. Then, for the first time in years, he writes, "My name is Marcus Dell, and I'm not invisible anymore." Heroes don't get to choose their battles, but sometimes they do get to choose who they carry out of them. It should have ended with healing, with a handshake, a message of hope, a new beginning. But stories, especially the real ones, rarely end where we want them to. Especially when the past has a way of showing up in the middle of your piece and whispering, "Not yet." 3 weeks after the precinct meeting, Echoes of War became more than just a short documentary. Jenna had edited the footage into a deeply personal 22-minute feature. Soft piano, ambient war zone echoes, Marcus's voice layered over Stallone's silence. No dramatic narration, just truth. "I didn't run from a man in a costume. I ran from the version of myself I never wanted to see again." The film went viral. Not overnight, but steadily, quietly, authentically. Veteran communities shared it. PTSD forums quoted it. Churches, colleges, even congressional offices requested private screenings. Jenna was invited to speak at panels. Marcus was asked to write. Stallone remained quiet. He didn't need to say anything. The story was breathing on its own. But when a story moves millions, it eventually finds someone who wants to tear it down. The first crack came from an op-ed in a political blog, titled "Stolen Valor in Hollywood: Why We Shouldn't Applaud Pretenders." It didn't mention Stallone by name. It didn't have to. The image at the top of the article was him, in the bandana, the boots, the knife, stepping out of that store like he'd walked out of 1985. The article accused actors of hijacking trauma, of glorifying war while never bleeding in one, of turning real pain into box office numbers. The words were sharp. He wore the uniform. He wielded the blade. But at the end of the day, he walked off set. The rest of us couldn't. At first, no one cared. But controversy breeds hunger. Podcasts picked it up. Critics resurfaced old interviews. Talk show hosts asked questions framed as jokes. And then, a major veterans publication ran a headline: Rambo Syndrome, when fiction becomes a dangerous substitute for service. Stallone's silence, once seen as noble, became suspicious. Was he hiding, ashamed, or guilty? Therefore, the story shifted from Marcus's redemption to Stallone's legitimacy. The internet argued. Some called him a national treasure. Others demanded an apology. Hashtags were born. Veteran voices. Rambo is not real. Respect real heroes. Jenna begged Stallone to respond, but he didn't, because deep down he wasn't sure if they were wrong. He retreated to his cabin in Big Bear. No staff, no publicist, no phone. Just a lake, a wood stove, and a quiet that wasn't yet peace. He watched old tapes, interviews, behind-the-scenes footage, and then he watched First Blood, alone, with the volume low. It hit different now. He wasn't watching Rambo survive. He was watching a man break in silence. And for the first time, Stallone whispered aloud, "Did I take from them more than I gave?" But the fallout didn't stop with headlines. Protesters showed up outside Jenna's film screening in Seattle, holding signs with phrases like, "Rambo's not a rank," and "You don't earn medals with makeup." Marcus saw it on TV. He slammed his fist against the wall, furious. It wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't even about the message. It was about dividing pain, deciding who had the right to carry it. Therefore, Marcus released a video. Raw, unfiltered. He sat in a bare room with no background music, no dramatic lighting. He looked straight into the lens. He didn't ask to be a hero. You gave that to him. I'm the one who walked into that store, desperate and broken. And he didn't tackle me. He didn't scream. He just stood there. And somehow, that was enough to stop me. So if you're angry he wore a costume, maybe ask yourself why it still has that much power. The video reached 10 million views in a week, and it did something no one expected. It reignited the debate. News anchors clashed. Veterans called in, divided. Some praised Marcus's clarity. Others condemned it as emotional manipulation. The media storm circled back, not to Stallone this time, but to Jenna. Did you manipulate this story? Did you stage the footage? Are you protecting a fraud? Her voice shook in interviews. Not from guilt, but from exhaustion. She had set out to tell a story about a broken man finding light. Now she was being accused of handing the flashlight to the wrong person. And behind all of it, Stallone stayed silent. Until one morning, 3 weeks after his disappearance, a package arrived at Jenna's apartment. No return label, just her name. Inside, a flash drive and a note. Play this when it's quiet. When you're ready. The footage was grainy, handheld. One take. Stallone stood at the edge of the lake by his cabin, snow in the trees, his breath visible. He wore no costume, just a simple black jacket, a gray beanie, and the weight of 1,000 unspoken lines behind his eyes. He looked into the lens and spoke. I never wore a uniform. I never held a rifle outside a movie set. I never watched my brother die in a foxhole, but I listened. I spent months, years, talking to the men who did, and they asked me one thing: don't make us look like monsters. He paused. I tried. Maybe I failed. But I never tried to be one of you. I just tried to make sure you weren't forgotten. His voice cracked on that last word. Then he looked down. And if I became something else in the process, I'm still figuring out what that means. Fade to black. Jenna uploaded the video with a single caption: the man behind the bandana. Within days, the narrative flipped. People saw Stallone, not as a symbol, but as a man trying to live beneath one. Veterans who had once criticized him began to speak differently. A former Marine wrote, I used to hate Rambo. Now I understand him. Not because of the movies, but because Stallone finally took off the mask. At a private event for wounded veterans in San Diego, Stallone shows up, quietly, unannounced. He doesn't wear Rambo. He wears a simple suit. He's invited to speak. He hesitates, then walks to the podium. Hundreds of eyes watch him. He clears his throat. They say I played a soldier, but I think the soldier was always playing me. Silence. Then, one man stands up. Marcus, applauding, slow, steady, and one by one others join. The room fills with sound, but Stallone doesn't smile. He just looks at Marcus and nods. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He simply stepped into the light, and that was enough to stop a crime in its tracks. That's how it all began. That's what the boy, Eli, had said when someone asked why he recorded the moment in that convenience store. That guy didn't even talk, Eli shrugged, but he made the bad guy run. Now, nearly 4 months later, Eli sat in the front row of a packed auditorium in Washington, D.C., wearing a tiny suit too big for his shoulders and gripping a plastic water bottle with sweaty hands. He had no idea that moment, the one where he captured a man in a costume standing still, would lead to this. Behind the curtain, Stallone adjusted his tie. He hated ties. They felt like leashes. But this moment demanded something else. Not flair, not muscle. Presence. Jenna stood beside him, hands clasped in front of her, visibly nervous. You okay? She asked. No, he said. But I'm here. They were backstage at the National Forum on Veteran Identity and Recovery. For the first time in the forum's 28-year history, the keynote speaker was not a veteran. He was an actor, one who had, willingly or not, become part of something much bigger than cinema. The event director had introduced him just moments ago. Please welcome Sylvester Stallone. The applause had erupted. Hesitant at first, then growing. He hadn't moved. Jenna touched his shoulder. They're waiting. He stepped forward. The auditorium was vast, quiet. Hundreds of faces, some curious, some skeptical, some expectant, looked up at him. He walked to the podium with measured steps. No bandana, no blade. Just a man with gray temples, creased eyes, and a voice the world thought they knew. He looked down at the microphone, then back at the crowd, and exhaled. I never served. I never heard a bullet whistle pass my ear. I never lost a brother in a real firefight, and I never had to carry the weight of silence, the way so many of you have. He paused. The room held its breath. But I listened. I watched. And I tried to become a mirror. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I made the pain look cooler than it really is. But I never meant to steal anything. He looked to his left. To Marcus, seated beside a row of veterans, hands folded, eyes locked on his. The truth is, when I walked out of that store, dressed like Rambo, and saw a young man look at me like I was death or salvation, I realized something. I realized I wasn't acting anymore. I was carrying a story I didn't write, but one I'd been trusted with. He stepped away from the podium. No more script, just voice. Marcus ran because of what he saw in me, but I stood there because of what I saw in him. A ghost of a war I never fought, a memory I never had, a man I could never become. And still, somehow, we met in the middle, a soldier and a shadow. Jenna wiped her eyes. Eli leaned forward. The room was silent again, and into that silence, Stallone offered his final truth. I can't give you your stories back, but I promise I'll never stop honoring them. Even when the cameras stop, even when the world moves on. He nodded once and stepped down. No music, no spotlight, just stillness. But the story didn't end there. After the speech, veterans lined up to speak with him. Not for autographs, but for moments. A woman placed a photograph in his hand. Her brother, lost in Afghanistan. He used to quote Rambo when he was scared, she said. Not because it was real, but because it gave him courage. A man with prosthetic legs said, "You made me feel seen, even when no one else wanted to." Another whispered, "I hated you for years, thought you were a fraud. Then I realized, I hated the world for needing you to fill in the blanks. Therefore, something shifted, not in the headlines, not on Twitter, but in the eyes of those who mattered." Stallone didn't become a hero that night. He became human, fully, flawed, honest, and free. Marcus continued writing. He finished a manuscript titled Surviving the Quiet. It became a bestseller among veterans groups, not for its prose, but for its truth. Jenna's film Echoes of War was archived in the Library of Congress for its impact on post-9/11 veteran discourse. Eli, he started a non-profit that distributed pocket cameras to underprivileged kids, with the motto, "Sometimes filming the world changes it." And Stallone? He returned to the cabin, not to disappear, but to write a letter, one more, to himself. "I used to think silence was failure. Now I know, sometimes silence is respect." Inside the Alvarez market, the bell above the door rings. The store looks the same. Dusty shelves, humming coolers, that faint smell of cinnamon gum. A framed photo hangs behind the counter now. Stallone in his Rambo outfit, shaking hands with Marcus. No caption, just the image. Alvarez, a little older, a little grayer, rings up a customer. Outside, the sun sets over Echo Park. A breeze rustles a flag in the corner, and the world, for a moment, holds its breath. Sometimes, you don't need to speak to be heard. You just need to show up wearing the truth. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us, and we hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel, because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.